Western military analysts identify what they call weapons of finance as acts of war that justify violent response when they're directed against us, that is. Cutting Iran out of global financial markets is different. The United States is openly carrying out extensive cyber war against Iran. That's praised. The Pentagon regards cyber war as an equivalent to an armed attack, which justifies military response, but that's, of course, when it's directed against us. The leading liberal figure in the State Department, Harold Koh, is the top State Department legal advisor. He says that cyber war is an act of war if it results in significant destruction, like the attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities. And such acts, he says, justify force in self-defense. But of course, he means only attacks against the United States or its clients. Well, Israel's lethal armory, which is enormous, includes advanced submarines recently provided by Germany. These are capable of carrying Israel's nuclear-tipped missiles, and these are sure to be deployed in the Persian Gulf or nearby if Israel proceeds with its plans to bomb Iran, or more likely, I suspect, to try to set up conditions in which the United States will do so. And the United States, of course, has a vast array of nuclear weapons all over the world, but surrounding the region from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, including enough firepower in the Persian Gulf to destroy most of the world. Another story that's in the news right now is the Israeli bombing of the Iraqi reactor in Osirak, which is suggested as a model for Israeli bombing of Iran. It's rarely mentioned, however, that the bombing of the Osirak reactor didn't end Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons program. It initiated it. There was no program before it, and the Osirak reactor was not capable of producing uranium for nuclear weapons. But of course, after the bombing, Saddam immediately turned to developing a nuclear weapons program, and if Iran is bombed, it's almost certain to proceed just as Saddam Hussein did after the Osirak bombing. In a few weeks, we'll be commemorating the 50th anniversary of the most dangerous moment in human history. Now, those are the words of historian, Kennedy advisor Arthur Schlesinger, is referring, of course, to the October 1962 missile crisis, the most dangerous moment in human history, others agree. At that time, Kennedy raised the nuclear alert to the second highest level, just short of launching weapons. He authorized NATO aircraft with Turkish or other pilots to take off, fly to Moscow, and drop bombs, setting off a likely nuclear conflagration. At the peak of the missile crisis, Kennedy estimated the probability of nuclear war at perhaps 50%. It's a war that would destroy the Northern Hemisphere, President Eisenhower had warned. And facing that risk, Kennedy refused to agree publicly to an offer by Khrushchev to end the crisis by simultaneous withdrawal of Russian missiles from Cuba and U.S. missiles from Turkey. These were obsolete missiles. They were already being replaced by invulnerable Polaris submarines. But it was felt necessary to firmly establish the principle that Russia has no right to have any offensive weapons anywhere beyond the borders of the USSR, even to defend an ally against U.S. attack. That's now recognized to be the prime reason for deploying missiles there, and actually a plausible one. Meanwhile, the United States must retain the right to have them all over the world, targeting Russia or China or any other enemy. In fact, in 1962, we've just recently learned, the United States had just secretly deployed nuclear missiles to Okinawa aimed at China, There was a moment of elevated regional tensions. All of that is very consistent with grand area conceptions, the ones I mentioned that were developed by Roosevelt's planners. Well, fortunately, in 1962, Khrushchev backed down, but the world can't be assured of such sanity forever. And particularly threatening, in my view, is that intellectual opinion and even scholarship hail Kennedy's behavior as his finest hour. My own view is it's one of the worst moments in history. Inability to face the truth about ourselves is all too common a feature of the intellectual culture. Also, personal life has ominous implications. Well, 10 years later, in 1973, during the Israel-Arab War, Henry Kissinger called a high-level nuclear alert. The purpose was to warn the Russians to keep hands off while he was, so we have recently learned, he was secretly informing Israel that they were authorized to violate the ceasefire that had been imposed jointly by the U.S. and Russia. When Reagan came into office a couple of years later, the United States launched operations probing Russian defenses, flying into Russia to probe defenses, and simulating air and naval attacks, and meanwhile placing Pershing missiles in Germany that had a 5-minute flight time to Russian targets. They were providing what the CIA called a super sudden first strike capability. The Russians, not surprisingly, were deeply concerned. Actually, that led to a major war scare in 1983. There have been hundreds of cases when human intervention aborted a first strike launch just minutes before launch. That's after automated systems gave false alarms. We don't have Russian records, but there's no doubt that their systems are far more accident-prone. Actually, it's a near miracle that nuclear war has been avoided so far. Meanwhile, India and Pakistan have come close to nuclear war several times, and the crises that led to that, especially Kashmir, remain. Both India and Pakistan have refused to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, along with Israel, and both of them have received U.S. support for development of their nuclear weapons programs, actually until today in the case of India, which is now a U.S. ally. War threats in the Middle East, which could become reality very soon, once again escalate the dangers. Well, fortunately, there's a way out of this, a simple way. There's a way to mitigate, maybe end, whatever threat Iran is alleged to pose. Very simple. Move towards establishing a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. The opportunity is coming again this December. There's an international conference scheduled to deal with this proposal. It has overwhelming international support, including, incidentally, a majority of the population in Israel. That's fortunately. Unfortunately, it's blocked by the United States and Israel. A couple of days ago, Israel announced that it's not going to participate and it won't consider the matter until there's a general regional peace. Obama takes the same stand. He also insists that any agreement must exclude Israel and even must exclude calls for other nations, meaning the U.S., to provide information about Israeli nuclear activities. The United States and Israel can delay regional peace indefinitely. They've been doing that for 35 years on Israel-Palestine, virtual international isolation. It's a long, important story that I don't have time to go into here. So therefore, there's no hope for an easy way to end what the West regards as the most severe current crisis. In no way unless there's large-scale public pressure. But there can't be large-scale public pressure unless people at least know about it. And the media have done a stellar job in averting that danger. Nothing reported about the conference or about any of the background. no discussion, apart from specialist arms control journals where you can read about it. So that blocks the easy way to end the worst existing crisis, unless people somehow find a way to break through this.